Welcome back. Good morning. Hello from Costa Rica, live here from Playa Junquillal. My name is Matt Rosenstiel. We had a false start with our previous video because I have very few technical skills and we had technical difficulties. Today I'm hoping the issue with our image is all fixed now. Today I'm talking about water here in Costa Rica, and especially the most critical questions that you need to know as a potential visitor or buyer here in Guanacaste, Costa Rica. Today we'll be covering a few simple topics related to nature's most important resource. Again, my name is Matt Rosenstiel. I work with Coldwell Banker Tamarindo Realty out here on the Pacific coast of Guanacaste, Costa Rica. I'm broadcasting live from the office of Latitude 10, the family business that my wife Anne-Marie and I run together. I've been in Costa Rica since 2008, originally came as a Peace Corps volunteer, and I'm now very happy to live here with my family just outside of the community of Playa Junquillal, which is about 30 minutes south of Tamarindo. Today we're talking about one of the most important issues that many people never really understand or figure out how to address entirely: water in Costa Rica. And hopefully we've got Anne-Marie watching now. Hopefully the image is all corrected and we're looking not at a mirror image anymore. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching our Facebook video live, please like or follow our page. Send any questions you might have in the comments section of the broadcast. I'll be more than happy to answer those as we go through the topics we're going to cover. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to my channel by clicking the red button below. Every week or two, I upload short informational videos to try and provide easy to understand, simple information for you. It is still reversed. That's frustrating. It must be that Facebook automatically does that. Let's see if we can change that. That's probably not gonna help things. Let's see. Is it straightforward now? We are still dealing with technical issues. I'm gonna take a break, resolve this, and rebroadcast from my computer, which I know works much better. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry for the interruption. Actually, yeah, good idea, Anne-Marie. Let's abandon the other screen. Okay, today we're talking about water. My apologies for the technical difficulties. We'll just plow ahead here without the computer so that you don't get a headache looking at it. So now, to go quickly over what we're going to cover today, we're going to address some very simple questions. First of all, is tap water drinkable here in Costa Rica? What's water administration and the laws related to water looking like? Water availability we'll discuss. And finally, we'll talk about the direct issues related to real estate purchases that you need to address related to water. Thanks very much for tuning in. I appreciate it. So let's go right in with our first question. Is tap water drinkable? Forgive me if you watched previously with the last video, but the caveat of my understanding is that when I speak about tap water in Costa Rica, my intimate knowledge is focused on the Guanacaste province, the westernmost region in Costa Rica, and specifically the Pacific coast of Guanacaste. Inland in Guanacaste, when you get closer to the mountains, I wouldn't be able to speak exactly to what the water quality is like. But if you're looking at the Pacific coast, Playa Tamarindo, Playas del Coco, Playa Flamingo, all kinds of communities that are some of the most popular places with expats, tap water is absolutely drinkable. The local entities that administrate, distribute water resources are charged with the national government with chlorinating regularly their water to ensure that no bacteria are in there. They get regular tests that they have to prove. They're demonstrating the quality of their water. And in general, the only time that you hear that bacteria have been found in water or there's been some problem are those occasional accidents where maybe a water line breaks, soil gets into the supply, or something else happens of that nature. Again, my knowledge and my answer that yes, drinking water is, tap water is drinkable, is based on my experience here on the western Pacific coast of Costa Rica in the north part of the country. I couldn't speak to the Central Valley, where there are large urban areas that might affect water quality, or the Caribbean coast, alternatively. Next, let's talk about water administration and relevant laws here in Costa Rica. The national ministry that handles water in Costa Rica is called AYA, or AIA. That name is essentially an abbreviation or the initials for alcantarillados y acueductos, or water systems and sewers. They're one of the biggest government ministries, and they've got some of the most resources among government ministries, and they are charged with overseeing the distribution of potable water in the entire country. AIA, in most communities, the water is actually distributed by a communal committee called an asada, A-S-A-D-A. An asada is a locally elected group of representatives who administer water in that town. You would find that in most small and medium-sized communities, when I say small and medium, I mean any place smaller than Tamarindo, or Langosta, some of the major tourism hubs on the coast. In most of the rural communities out here near the Pacific, water is going to be sold and managed by one of those asadas. Again, a committee of local community representatives who are elected every year to distribute and sell water. AIA, AYA, and local asadas are the only two entities in Costa Rica, aside from a few municipalities which are an exception to the rule, but AIA and local asadas are the only entities that should be selling water unless you live in one of those municipalities. AIA oversees the asadas. They are the national body that controls them and ensures that they're fulfilling their obligations. The local asada is normally the entity that would be coming by and charging your bill, reading your meter, and selling you the water directly. There are cases where AIA administers the local water distribution system. AIA, in bigger areas, when you get to tourism hubs like Tamarindo, Playas del Coco, etc., you do find instances where AIA is the local water distributor, and in some major municipalities, urban areas, that is also the case. So if you're in a situation where you're being sold water by someone who is not either AIA or your local asada, you need to start asking questions about what kind of actual right that entity has to distribute water. Moving on, water availability here in Costa Rica, and especially the western province, Guanacaste, that I'm speaking of. 3 years ago, in 2014 and 15, Guanacaste had one of the worst droughts that we've had in a century. For 2 straight years, the rainy season here in Guanacaste was underperforming, to put it in that terms. There was much less rainfall, about a 50% deficit. In some areas, it was worse than the normal average annual rainfall that we expect in this region. That drought revealed that, in fact, many water resources in this region are pretty fragile and somewhat overexploited. They found that in a lot of coastal communities, all of a sudden, when this drought hit, that suddenly there wasn't enough water in wells to supply the demand. If you are considering a property purchase in Costa Rica, you absolutely, and especially in this region, the Pacific coast of Guanacaste, you need to ask about the water situation in your community. how things went in 2014 and 15, and if there was a water shortage, which in many communities they were depending on water tanked in cistern trucks. If there was a shortage, you should be asking what has been done to remediate those issues since the last drought. Now obviously 2014 and 15 was an exceptional drought where we had I think it was the worst amount of rainfall since the 30s that they had recorded, but it's an important question to look at. In many areas, especially those major tourism hubs, the government is resolving this problem through pipeline projects and improving water infrastructure. They're tapping into aquifers where there is an abundant resource and bringing out water to areas where there's less. I'm not going to go into the details of those projects. The main point is to say that when you're considering a visit or moving to Costa Rica, it's important to ask, how did this area do in the drought, and how are we going to avoid any water shortages in the future if there were in the past? Moving on, talking about water in real estate. What questions do you need to ask, or what do you need to know if you're considering a purchase here when it comes to water? Well, if you are thinking about building a home here in Costa Rica, there's an absolutely critical question for you. In order to obtain a building permit here, you have to present what's called the water letter among expat communities, or a water availability letter, where essentially the local supplier, which in most cases would be an ASADA, in some cases AIA, they have to certify that there is water available to your property in order for you to get that construction permit. So, unless you are certain that you're going to be able to get that water letter, you might have an issue getting your building permit. In some areas, in fact, they have even issued a moratorium on granting new water letters for undeveloped properties because these water shortages that resulted from the 2014 and 15 drought. In the case of that specific moratorium, as soon as a pipeline project is completed, there will be no problem getting a new water letter. But there are certain circumstances in which properties without homes on them for different reasons would not be able to get the water letter. Like I mentioned, that moratorium does affect some communities here in northwestern Guanacaste. There's other situations where there simply isn't water service to the property, and so no local supplier is going to be able to issue that letter. For example, in some communities where they do not have that local organization that I discussed previously, the ASADA or ASADA, you're not going to be able to obtain a water availability letter certifying that there's service, and you won't be able to get a building permit without that water letter. So another question, if you're considering a real estate purchase here in Costa Rica, one that's absolutely critical, you should absolutely ask your agent, what's the situation with my water letter for this property? Is there one that already exists? Can I obtain one? Or if you need to, make it a component of due diligence. And in fact, in most due diligence processes, you should be able to obtain the water letter that will be necessary to get your building permit. If you can't get a clear answer on that issue, or if you're just given a future promise, then you absolutely need to insist that the water letter and resolving that question is part of your due diligence process so that you understand exactly what the situation is going to be when you go to get a building permit. It's been a pretty contentious issue in this area, specifically because in those situations where water letters are unavailable, sometimes people have purchased property with either the lack of knowledge that they needed this particular letter, or they've purchased property under the understanding that they would be able to get a water letter, and subsequently they weren't able to get one, so they weren't able to build. It's in this region, probably one of the most pressing issues or one of the most important dynamics between development and local government authorities that you need to understand when you're making a purchase decision. Those few questions are the ones that I plan to address here. We discussed, first of all, tap water, is it drinkable? And in my region of Costa Rica, the western Pacific coast, absolutely water is drinkable. Then we talked about water administration and the national laws that are relevant. We mentioned AIA, the National Water Ministry, and also the local committees of people who are elected to distribute and manage water in small and medium communities. Those are called ASADAs, A-S-A-D-A. We also discussed the fact that in some communities, larger ones, AIA is in fact in charge of water distribution and managing that themselves. Next, we talked about water availability, the effect the recent 2014-15 drought had on the region. And finally, we talked about how that drought and other water availability issues need to be addressed if you're considering a real estate purchase. You need to find out what's happening with a water letter if you plan to build in Costa Rica. And again, that letter is a document issued by either your local ASADA or AIA if they're managing your community's water that says there's water service to this property. If you have any questions, please feel free to put a comment. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties we had today, sort of a false start getting the screen issue figured out. Anyhow, I appreciate you watching. You can contact me by emailing me at matt@cbtamarindo.com. I'll put that in the comments for the video and also on YouTube. I'll also put my phone number there in case you'd like to give me a call or you have any pressing questions. Thank you very much for tuning in. I appreciate you watching. Have a great day and a great weekend.